It's Thursday, Tryon, North Carolina, Melrose Mountain, higher ground. What is faith? Well, the book of James talks about a type of faith. It talks about the importance of faith. But what is faith? It's a reliance or a trust in someone or something. The trouble with faith is that it can be temporal. That is, we can have faith up until we run into conditions or situations or problems, difficulties that test our faith. For example, Peter, out there on the Sea of Galilee, he said, "Jesus, bid me come to you." Peter got out of the boat. His faith was great. There was none of the others in the boat that said, "Let me come to you." And yet when Jesus took his eyes off of Jesus and put his eyes on the situation, the wind and the waves, he began to sink. His faith was temporal. It was dependent upon the conditions and the situation in which he was in. James is all about faith. It's about faith demonstrated, not just spoken. Words are cheap, aren't they? We can say we have a lot of faith, but when it comes right down to it, how much faith do we have? Well, James 1 starts out in verse 2 with, "Consider it joy when you come into trials and tribulations." I have a hard time still doing that, considering it joy. Now, the key word in verse 3 is knowing. Knowing is in the knowledge of and having a confidence in the knowledge of God and faith that he is using your situation to produce endurance and will result in making us complete. Last night, our pastor here in Landrum said, how many of you can see good came out of a situation? And I said, it all depends whether you were in the situation or able to look back on it. Well, faith is knowing God in such a way that even when the situation changes, even when trials and tribulation comes, we've developed enough endurance, we've developed enough trust in God that we now have a faith that will see us through that trial or tribulation without losing a lot of sleep, without being terribly upset. Then you can count it joy, can't you? So the more we know God, the more we can faith through situations. Now remember, at the beginning of this talk, I told you about Peter as he climbed out of the boat, took his eyes off Jesus and began to sink. But a few years later, Peter was writing in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. And here's what he said. "Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God." He knew God, and he knew his mighty hand. Now listen, "that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your cares or all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you." Had Peter grown in his faith? Was his faith less temporal? Yes, it was. And that's my prayer for you and for me, that every day we would get to know God better and that our faith would be less and less temporal, less and less dependent upon situations, less and less dependent upon conditions, less and less dependent upon the turmoil of life, but that our faith might hold fast like an anchor, and that we might find the same faith that Peter found, that we might be able to cast all of our cares, all of our troubles, and all of our worries on him because he cares for us. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.